Midnight in South Carolina's low country. The air is thick, the darkness absolute. For generations, the Murdaugh name ruled here, untouchable, a dynasty cloaked in power and privilege. Their estate, Moselle, was a fortress of wealth and secrets. But on June 7, 2021, that fortress was breached by violence. A frantic 911 call shattered the silence. Alex Murdaugh, the family patriarch, claimed he'd come home to a nightmare. His wife Maggie and son Paul gunned down near the kennels. The kingdom had become a crime scene, continues. The Murdaugh family's legacy, built over a century, was suddenly stained with blood. The world would soon learn that even the most powerful can fall, continues. Blue lights flashed across the Moselle property, illuminating a scene of horror. The investigation was just beginning, but the questions were already multiplying. First responders arrived to chaos and carnage. Paul, just 22, had been shot twice at close range, the violence unmistakable. Maggie, 52, was found nearby, struck down as she tried to escape. 2 weapons. 2 lives ended in a calculated, merciless attack. The brutality stunned even seasoned officers, continues. The vast Moselle estate became a sprawling crime scene, evidence markers scattered across the damp ground. Every detail, every shell casing, every footprint hinted at a killer who knew exactly what they were doing, continues. Under the harsh glare of headlights, investigators began piecing together a night of terror that would haunt the Low Country forever. With the Murdaugh's deep ties to local law enforcement, the case was handed to SLED, the state's elite investigators. It was a move to avoid any hint of favoritism. SLED combed the darkness for answers, shell casings, tire tracks, footprints, anything that could reveal the truth. Continues. The use of 2 different firearms raised chilling questions. Was this the work of 2 killers, or a single methodical executioner? The evidence was mounting, but so was the mystery. Continues. Every clue collected in the oppressive night deepened the sense of dread. The hunt for answers had only just begun. Continues. And as the investigation pressed on, the shadow of suspicion began to fall over the Murdaugh legacy itself. In the days that followed, rumors swirled and the public's fascination grew. Who could have committed such a crime? And was it connected to the past? Just 2 years earlier, Paul Murdaugh had been at the center of a fatal boat crash that killed 19-year-old Mallory Beach. At the time of his death, Paul faced felony charges, his family's influence under scrutiny like never before. Continues. The community was divided. Some saw the murders as a possible act of revenge, a vigilante's justice for Mallory Beach. Others wondered if darker secrets were at play. Continues. Investigators had to consider every possibility as the Murdaugh's world unraveled under the weight of suspicion and tragedy. Detectives questioned a shaken Alex Murdaugh. He claimed he'd been away visiting his ailing mother and returned to find the bodies. But as SLED dug deeper, cracks appeared in his story. His timeline shifted. His demeanor on police body cam footage was odd, grief mixed with moments of unsettling calm and a need to control the narrative. Continues. Forensic evidence, or the lack of it, was troubling. No forced entry, no unknown DNA, no fingerprints from a stranger. The crime felt contained, almost intimate. Continues. The image of a grieving patriarch began to unravel, replaced by a growing cloud of suspicion that would soon engulf the entire Murdaugh dynasty. The murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were not just a family tragedy. They were the spark that ignited a media firestorm and exposed a century of secrets. The investigation would soon spiral into something far bigger, a web of financial fraud, insurance scams, and mysterious deaths whispered about for years in the Low Country. Continues. At the center of it all stood Alex Murdaugh, the man who made the 911 call, now the focus of a national scandal that defied belief. Continues. The search for justice for Maggie and Paul had only just begun, but the path to the truth would lead through a dark, tangled legacy of power, corruption, and death. Continues. The unraveling of the Murdaugh dynasty was underway, and the world was watching. In the small town of Walterboro, South Carolina, the Colleton County Courthouse became the epicenter of a legal earthquake. For 6 intense weeks, It was the stage for the trial of Richard Alex Murdaugh, the once powerful scion of a legal dynasty, now accused of the brutal murders of his wife, Maggie, and his 22-year-old son, Paul. Every seat was filled, and a global audience watched, captivated by the unfolding drama. The proceedings were more than just a murder trial. They were a public dissection of a family's fall from grace and a region's reckoning with a legacy of power. Inside, jurors listened to 76 witnesses, examined hundreds of pieces of evidence, and weighed the competing narratives of prosecution and defense. The question at the heart of it all was as simple as it was monstrous. Did a father, a husband, a man who seemingly had everything, slaughter his own family in cold blood? The prosecution, led by the methodical Crichton Waters, painted a picture of a desperate man trapped in a perfect storm of his own making. They argued the motive was not passion, but preservation. Alex Murdaugh, they contended, was on the brink of a catastrophic financial exposure. On the very day of the murders, he had been confronted by his law firm's CFO about missing funds. A hearing for the fatal boat crash lawsuit, which threatened to unearth his tangled finances, was just 3 days away. Prosecutors argued that the murders of Maggie and Paul were a monstrous gambit to distract and delay, a calculated act to garner sympathy and halt the inquiries that were about to bring his world crashing down. The state's case was built on a tripod of modern forensics. First, cell phone data that shattered Murdaugh's alibi. It showed him moving frantically around the property after the murders were believed to have occurred. Second, a crucial piece of video recovered from Paul's phone, filmed at the dog kennels just minutes before the killings. In the background, a voice, identified by over half a dozen witnesses as Alex Murdaugh's, could be clearly heard, placing him at the murder scene at the exact time he claimed to be napping at the main house. Finally, they presented gunshot residue found on a blue raincoat, inexplicably stashed at his mother's home, suggesting a clumsy attempt to hide evidence. The defense, led by the formidable duo of Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin, launched a vigorous counter-offensive. Their strategy was to portray Alex not as a monster, but as a flawed, grieving family man, crippled by a decades-long opioid addiction that made him paranoid and prone to lying, especially to law enforcement. They argued the state's case was pure speculation, a theory in search of evidence. They attacked the integrity of the investigation, accusing the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, of critical errors, including failing to properly secure the crime scene, which they claimed led to evidence contamination. The defense floated an alternative theory, that the murders were the work of two shooters, seeking vigilante justice for the death of Mallory Beach in the boat crash. Then came the trial's most dramatic moment. Alex Murdaugh took the stand in his own defense. In a stunning admission, he confessed to lying to investigators about his whereabouts on the night of the murders, blaming his opioid-induced paranoia. He also admitted to stealing millions from his clients and law firm. But through tears, he vehemently denied killing his wife and son. It was a colossal gamble, asking the jury to believe he was a prolific liar and a thief, but not a murderer. After the closing arguments, where Crichton Waters methodically pieced together the timeline of deceit and Dick Harpootlian passionately pleaded for the jury to see reasonable doubt, the case was handed over. After 6 weeks of complex testimony, the 12 jurors retreated to deliberate. The courtroom and the millions watching held their breath, expecting a long, arduous debate. But in less than 3 hours, a shockingly swift decision had been reached. The courtroom was silent with anticipation as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. Alex Murdaugh, his large frame towering over the defense table, stood to face his fate. The clerk's voice cut through the tension. On the charge of the murder of Maggie Murdaugh, guilty. On the charge of the murder of Paul Murdaugh, guilty. A quiet gasp rippled through the gallery. The verdict, decisive and absolute, marked the shattering conclusion to a trial that had ripped the veil off a powerful family, exposing the rot of deceit, addiction, and violence that lay beneath. The courtroom's atmosphere was a mixture of stunned silence, quiet sobs, and profound relief. Alex's face, which had been a mask of anxiety, reddened and seemed to collapse as the reality of the words set in. He was immediately placed in handcuffs, his status instantly transformed from legal titan to convicted double murderer. The prosecution team, who had lived with the case for 20 months, exchanged solemn, exhausted glances. They believed justice, hard-won and long-awaited, had finally been served. For the community of the Low Country, the verdict resonated far beyond the courthouse walls. It was a powerful, unambiguous statement that the era of one family's name placing them beyond reproach was over. For the first time in a century, a Murdaugh was held accountable, and the message was clear. No one is above the law. The trial was over, but the consequences for Alex Murdaugh were just beginning. At his sentencing, Judge Clifton Newman delivered a scathing rebuke before handing down the maximum penalty, 2 consecutive life sentences in prison without the possibility of parole. The murder convictions were just the tip of the iceberg. Still looming were nearly 100 additional state charges for his staggering financial crimes, ensuring that no matter what happened on appeal, Alex Murdaugh would almost certainly die behind bars. The Murdaugh name, once a symbol of legal power and influence in South Carolina, was now irrevocably branded with the stain of betrayal, corruption, and the ultimate sin of murder. Guilty.